Catus Maximus here. Sorry I don't have a very bright light. I figured I was working on these lights. I'll not set up my big light. These are Vevor's, they call them stage lights. These are party lights, but they are DMX. They're pretty cheap. I think like 60 bucks or something a piece, 65 bucks. Somewhere right around there. Asked them to actually, it's kind of a cheap item, and I said, well, why not send me 2 of them? Just because I wanted to check out the synchronization and the DMX. So there are, I guess there's a variety of grades of, I guess you would call stage lights, concert lights. These are more set up for, clubs and parties and that type of stuff. Then they're like really, giant heavy duty ones. But most of these have these things called DMX. So there's a little display, and what it does is allows them to synchronize multiple sets of lights together, and they'll either synchronize and just do the same thing at precisely the same moment, or you can actually control them using a special DMX control panel, and you can daisy chain a bunch of lights together. So that's why I asked for 2, is I wanted to check out the whole DMX system, which apparently supports 512 of these units, or similar units put together. I have no idea what happens if you attach one DMX light to another one that's a different style, but these things are fan cooled, and I'll show in a minute. They have, it's a metal construction. As far as party lights, they have like kind of a multicolor disco ball thing that animates. They have like a projector with some various symbols that animates. They have red and green lasers, which have little patterns, which also spin around and animate. And they have actually surprisingly bright strobe light. This is a big cob LED, totally exposed. It isn't protected, oddly enough. But it is a pretty high output strobe light. This type of setup here can never run continuously because it would overheat, but acting as a strobe, it's only running part of the time. So anyway, we've got 2 of these here. I will mention that it comes with a pretty short cord, but the DMX has been standardized to use what's known as XLR connectors, which are, for professional music, it is the bog standard connection. So you can use any 3-pin balanced XLR cable to connect lights together. It came with a really short, I'd have to say, maybe a 1 meter cord, but I plugged them both together. I guess the one thing that I find odd is that on these ports, on the input side, you do have, the standard press button lock, but they don't have a lock on the output. It just has high friction, so it would have been nice if they included slightly better locking output ports. These are definitely not outdoor or any kind of water resistance rated, but these things would be offer quite a bit of patterns and colors for, like a Christmas projector light. If you had some kind of overhang you could put it under, these would be pretty cool. And considering for the price, we have motorized animated lasers, projection lamps, and motorized animated kind of disco ball thing, and there's actually quite a bit of complication inside this unit with, of course, a big fan to keep it all cool. And I shouldn't fail to mention that these have a microphone in them so they can change patterns when they hear sound or when there is, a beat in the music. You have a remote control, an infrared remote, and I don't really know where the receptor is, but it could either be inside, it's probably inside this disco ball area, so it's easier for it to receive the signal. So it's kind of nice that you can operate them via remote or through DMX control. And I'll show on the back, but there's just you can basically control each module as you see fit. We just have, and then of course it gives you the actual DMX channel number. So if you have a DMX controller, this guide will tell you exactly what channel and what numerical value is controlling what. Plug these in for just a second to show the back, and then we'll do a little demonstration here. Just plug them in, and you just take your XLR cable if you want them to synchronize, It is a pretty stiff plug. This isn't going to fall out in the out, but I just still would have liked to have a traditional locking plug. Plug that onto the in, and then when you turn them on, whatever is the first unit that has the out connected is what becomes the primary unit. Then everything else becomes secondary or follower units, and that's just determined by how you have it connected. So as soon as you turn it on, I mean, of course it's all glowing on the inside too. Fans are kind of loud, but these are the type of things that you're going to be pretty far away from, and it's going to be such a noisy environment you wouldn't hear the fans. But they're rated for 30 watts total output power if, I guess, everything is going. And then you can see here the DMX controls, which is a real standard. You know, these displays and the 4-button control is standardized. I have a couple of other random lights I've picked up over the years that are DMX, and they all seem to have this. As you can see, this first one is set to auto, and since this is an in, it just automatically goes to, I assume they're meaning slave there, and blinks. And now they are both perfectly synchronized. One thing I was going to mention is, I guess the animated pattern generator on the lasers is just whenever the laser's on, it randomly goes. So when even though the lasers are synchronized, as we can see, we have both of them independent, or both of them are turning on and off at the same time. They aren't showing the same pattern, which I thought was a little bit interesting. Basically show the whole thing. As we can see, the other lights are perfectly synchronized, so given the nature of it, I accept that they wouldn't have a digital control integrated into the pattern of the lasers. Everything else does. And so this is just the auto mode, where it kind of just cycles through all the various modes. I mean, it is pretty bright. I mean, being up on a ceiling in a, low light club or whatever, or once again outdoors for Christmas lights, these things will be more than bright enough. And it seems that there's just like a whole world of these things nowadays. So not a lot else to say about these things besides for a variety light. I think for $60, and once again being DMX control and synchronized, offering strobe, laser, the little projector, which on many of these types of projector things you can, and if you want to dive into it, you can take it apart and remove the little stencils, and then these will just cast big, kind of like white spheres. But, steel case. Once again, there's a whole world of these things, but these are just kind of neat, particularly once again with that, the digital control on. I like the fact that you can customize and choose whether you're using this section, the strobe, these, or a combination of all the above. But I'm a little curious, and I want to take a little bit of a look inside here. I'll pop this lens off so we can see what that looks like. Obviously, I mean, even though it's a decent case, we want to be careful. This is just a thin lens, just held on by 2 little screws. And that gives you actually already a pretty healthy look on the inside here. So, well, I'll zoom in because I can't hold that with one hand. So this is that, and this just has a little stepper motor which just rocks this just a few degrees one direction and a few degrees, just a few degrees one direction, and then it reverses again to animate that. This just has these, I don't know if you can see, there's a little mark right there. There's a soldering iron burn on the plastic housing of that one particular lighting element. And it just has a motor behind it to spin this. And that's where it's casting from. And then way down in there, you can just see those are going to be the laser modules. And of course, they actually have a big heat sink. You can just make it out right there. That's the big heat sink on the back of the strobe light, so it's actually good to see. I'm surprised they did put a big heat sink on there. I guess it's powerful enough to require it. Otherwise, quite a bit of airspace in there. Upon further inspection, what I thought was soldering iron burns are indeed soldering iron burns, but they melted the plastic to keep the lenses on the stencils there. Of course, we have a power supply. We have a big old control board with just a million wires coming out of it to control the LEDs and motors. One thing I could not find was the infrared receiver, and I couldn't figure it out, but back here there's this little floating board. This thing is really hard to... This thing right here, it's just connected to this little circuit board, which is just floating. And so, interestingly enough, grab one of the remotes. I assume they're infrared, and they are probably dual, because it does have an infrared transmitter on the remote, but there is no infrared receiver. That's a radio antenna, so these are both combination infrared and radio transmitting remotes, so I thought that was interesting too. Not a lot else. Well, after pulling out some screws to loosen it, I wanted to check this part out, and we can see from the edge and from how heavy it is, those are actually glass lenses. So this can be taken out and cleaned. Now it's a little bit floppy. And there's a look at the primary projector. And I'm going to actually see how easy it is to remove those stencils. Where's my light here? Here's one of the stencil elements. So we can see that they've just melted the plastic to hold in the lens. Unfortunately, the lens is set on top of what appears to be like a little stainless steel silhouette or stencil. And so you would actually have to push it out, which would damage these tabs, and you have to use a little soldering iron to melt them back in order to remove them. So it would be a little bit of work, but you could do it. Other than that, I think that covers basically most of the internals of this. And even though the manual is pretty good, and they even have DMX properly there, there is one, as with these kind of Chinese products, there's always some error. I was just noticing it right here. Instead of DMX, they have DWX instead of DMX right there. Oops. Other than that, kind of cool, just multifunction party lights. And if you're somebody who might like to do Christmas lights or something like that, obviously for parties or simple clubs, it's neat that they can synchronize to DMX and that kind of stuff. But as like Christmas lights, you can set up something like this and you just get a whole variety of stuff in just one box, and you don't have to hang a bunch of lights and things like that, so they can have an advantage there too. Anyway, thanks for watching.